The pines whispered of death that morning. The ground was damp with dew, and the air carried the faint tang of gunpowder. Jonas Hale rode through the mist like a ghost who'd forgotten how to rest. His horse's hooves sank softly into the forest floor, leaving tracks that vanished behind him. He'd been following a blood trail for 2 days, thin streaks on broken bark, boot prints pressed deep into mud. The men he hunted had taken his brother's life and burned his wagon to ash. Somewhere ahead, those men breathed the air that Jonas was bound to steal from them. He'd seen what vengeance did to a man. It hollowed him, left him clinging to purpose like a dying fire. But still he followed. The war had taught him only 2 things worth knowing: how to track and how to kill. The rest, mercy, forgiveness, the softness of a quiet life, felt like memories that belonged to someone else. By midday, the mist had lifted, revealing the solemn stretch of pines rising like pillars toward a pale sky. The forest was too quiet. Even the birds held their tongues. Jonas dismounted, running his fingers through the cold ashes of a dead campfire. He picked up a charred piece of fabric, a woman's shawl singed and torn. The smell of smoke and old fear clung to it. His chest tightened. His brother's wife had worn something like this once years ago, before the war and before the world turned to iron. He pushed deeper into the woods, following the faint drag of something heavy, a body or a wounded horse. Then he heard it, a sound soft as breath, almost lost beneath the wind. He froze, hand on his revolver. Another sound, a whimper this time. Human. He followed it, stepping carefully through ferns slick with morning damp until he saw her. She lay half hidden among the bracken, her dress torn, her skin smeared with dirt and blood. A young woman, barely more than 20. Her eyes were wide with panic when she saw him, her voice raw and trembling. "Don't come closer," she warned, clutching a broken branch like a weapon. Jonas stopped where he stood, palms open, voice steady. "You're hurt," he said. "Ain't here to harm you." She didn't lower the branch. Her breath came quick and shallow. "You with them?" "If I were," he said, "you'd already know." For a long moment, only the wind moved between them. Then her arm dropped. The branch slipped from her fingers. Jonas stepped forward and saw the wound on her leg, a deep gash, angry and red, crawling up from her knee. She'd tried to bind it herself with a strip of cloth, but infection had already set in. He crouched beside her, his shadow falling over her face. "What's your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Wren." "Jonas Hale," he replied. "You were with the wagons?" Her eyes flicked toward the burned trail behind them. "My father's farm. They came at dawn. Took everything. Killed everyone." Her voice cracked. "They said they'd sell me in Bozeman." Jonas looked away, jaw tight. Bozeman was 3 days east. If the gang took that road, they'd reach the trading post by nightfall. Every hour he spent here cost him ground he couldn't afford to lose. Still, he couldn't walk away. Not yet. He uncorked his flask, poured whiskey over her wound. She screamed, grabbing at the grass, but didn't pull away. "Hold still," he muttered. He tore a strip from his own shirt and bound her leg tight, his hands steady despite the tremor in her breath. When it was done, she sagged back against the earth, eyes closed. "Why, help me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jonas wiped his hands on his jeans. "Because I can." He built a small fire as dusk crept in, careful to keep it low and hidden from the trail. The light flickered against her face, softening the dirt into something almost delicate. She watched him with quiet suspicion, as though waiting for the truth to turn ugly. "You're hunting them," she said finally. "Aren't you?" "Yeah." "For money?" "For blood." She turned away, drawing her knees close. "Revenge don't bring back the dead," she said. Jonas poked at the fire, sparks leaping into the dark. "No, but it keeps the living from forgetting." The forest stretched wide and endless around them. Every creak of the trees sounded like a gun being cocked, every whisper of wind a voice calling from the past. Jonas checked his rifle, reloaded his revolver, and listened. He'd learned in the war that silence was a liar. It always came before trouble. When the fire burned down to embers, he spread his coat on the ground beside her. "Sleep," he said. She shook her head. "They'll come back." He looked toward the tree line, eyes sharp. Let him try. Hours passed in uneasy quiet. The moon rose high, pale as bone through the canopy. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, a long, mournful note that drifted through the trees like a prayer for the lost. Jonas's hand rested on his rifle, every sense tuned to the darkness. He thought of his brother, the way he used to laugh, the way his hands trembled when he rode home during the war. He'd promised him once they'd start fresh after the fighting, by land, build something that would last. Now, all that remained was ash. Revenge was the only thing left that made sense. Then came the sound, a faint crunch of leaves. Jonas froze. Another step. Then another. He reached over, gently pressing a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Wake up," he whispered. Her eyes flew open, fear sparking instantly. She heard it too. Hoofbeats. Distant but closing fast. Jonas doused the fire with dirt, grabbed his rifle, and crouched low. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Through the pines, shadows moved, 3 riders no more than 50 yards away, their lanterns casting thin blades of light. Clara's voice trembled. "It's them." Jonas's jaw tightened. "Stay down." The riders stopped near the stream, voices low. Jonas could just make out their words, the name Carson carried on the wind. Reed Carson, the leader, the man who'd slit his brother's throat. Jonas felt his pulse hammer in his temples. Every instinct screamed to fire, to end it here and now. But the woman beside him mattered now, too. If he missed, if they saw her, she'd die before dawn. He breathed slow, steady, waited. One of the riders dismounted, stepping toward the ferns. The faint metallic click of a revolver echoed in the stillness. Jonas's finger tightened around the trigger. Then the horse neighed sharply, spooked by something unseen, and the men turned back toward the trail, muttering curses. In moments, they were gone, swallowed by the dark. Jonas didn't move for a long time. Only when the last echo faded did he lower his rifle. Clara exhaled shakily, clutching the edge of his coat. "You should have shot," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. His eyes followed the trail where they'd vanished. "Tomorrow." The night returned to silence, thick and alive. The fire was cold, the moon a pale witness above them. Jonas sat against a tree, rifle across his knees, watching the horizon for the dawn he knew would bring blood. In the quiet pines, revenge still whispered, but so did something else, softer, unfamiliar. And though Jonas didn't yet know its name, it stirred in the dark like the first breath before a storm. The first light of dawn cut through the trees in pale gold, catching the smoke from Jonas's small fire as it drifted skyward. He'd slept little, if at all. Every sound in the woods had kept him awake. The rustle of branches, the murmur of the stream, the soft breath of the woman beside him. Clara stirred beneath his coat, her face pale, her lips cracked from thirst. The wound on her leg had gone angry red overnight, and he could smell the sickness setting in. Jonas knew that if he didn't find clean water and a place to rest soon, she wouldn't last another day. He saddled his horse and helped her to her feet. She leaned on him, trembling but stubborn. "You should have left me," she said quietly. "They'll find you because of me." Jonas shook his head. "If they find me, it won't be because of you." Her eyes narrowed, studying him. "Then what drives you?" "Hate." He didn't answer. Hate was a word too small for what lived in his chest. They moved slowly through the forest, the morning alive with birdsong and the creak of branches heavy with dew. Clara winced with every step, but she refused to stop. Jonas admired her grit, though he'd never say it aloud. He'd known soldiers twice her size who'd beg for mercy after less pain. By midday, they reached a creek that ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Jonas knelt beside it, filling his canteen, while Clara dipped her fingers into the current and sighed with relief. The sunlight caught in her hair, and for a fleeting moment Jonas saw her not as a burden, but as a reminder of what he'd lost. The innocence, the softness, the part of him that hadn't yet turned to iron. As they rested, she spoke again. "I saw one of them, their leader. Reed Carson, they called him. Big man, scar on his chin. He's the one who gave the order to burn everything." Jonas's hand stilled on the canteen. The name hit him like a bullet to the ribs. Reed Carson. Once long ago, he'd known a man by that name, a deserter from his unit, a thief who'd left his own comrades to die. Jonas had spared him then, believing even a coward might find redemption. Now that mercy had come back to haunt him. Where were they headed? He asked, his voice low. East toward the valley, she said. They have horses, rifles, supplies. You can't take them alone. I don't plan to take them alive. They followed the creek downstream until the trees thinned into a clearing. Ahead lay the remains of an old lumber camp, half-collapsed cabins, sawdust heaps overgrown with weeds, the ghost of a sawmill leaning against the slope like a dying animal. Jonas led Clara to one of the huts, helped her inside, and started a small fire. The air smelled of rot and old pine sap. She watched him clean his rifle with meticulous care. You fought in the war, she said. He nodded. Scout for the Union. And now you hunt men. Some habits don't die easy. Her gaze lingered on him. You talk like someone who's already gone. Jonas looked up, meeting her eyes. Maybe I am. A sound broke through their silence, the distant crack of branches, too deliberate to be the wind. Jonas froze, then motioned for her to stay low. He crept to the doorway, eyes scanning the tree line. A bear lumbered into the clearing, drawn by the smell of blood and smoke. Its fur was matted, its eyes dull with hunger. Jonas grabbed his rifle and fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The bullet struck the bear's shoulder, but it only enraged the beast. It charged, snarling, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Jonas fired again, missed. Clara snatched a burning branch from the fire and hurled it toward the animal. Flames burst against its fur, and it veered away with a furious roar, crashing through the underbrush until the forest swallowed the sound. Jonas stood still, heart pounding. Smoke curled from the barrel of his rifle. He turned to her, breathing hard. You've got more fight in you than most men I've known. She sank to the floor, trembling. I'm tired of running. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Running won't save you out here. That night, the fire burned low, painting their faces in amber light. Jonas sat by the doorway, watching the stars flicker between the trees. Clara broke the silence first. Do you ever think about what you'll do after? After what? After it's done. After they're all dead. He thought about it, then shook his head. Ain't much after for men like me. She stared into the flames. There's always an after. You just have to want it. Her words lingered in the quiet. Jonas had lived too long without wanting anything but revenge. Yet here, under the vast hush of the pines, something in him began to shift, small, fragile, but undeniable. Later, as the fire dimmed, he spoke again, almost to himself. I used to think revenge was clean, like pulling a trigger, simple, final. But it ain't. It stains you, makes you forget who you were before. Clara listened in silence, her expression softening. Then don't let it, she said gently. Don't let it take what's left. He looked at her and found himself unable to answer. She was right, but he didn't know how to stop. The wind rose, whispering through the trees, carrying with it the faint echo of hoofbeats. Jonas was on his feet, in an instant, rifle in hand. Clara pulled herself upright, wincing. Are they back? He nodded once. They're close. He doused the fire and peered through a crack in the wall. 3 riders again, moving slow, scanning the ground for tracks. The one in front wore a black coat, Reed Carson. Even from this distance, Jonas recognized the way he sat his horse, proud and cruel. Clara gripped his arm. Don't go out there. Not yet. Jonas's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. I've waited long enough. He moved to the door, then stopped. Her hand was still on his arm, trembling but firm. If you go now, you'll die, she whispered. And everything you've done, everyone you've lost, it'll mean nothing. He looked down at her, at the fear and fire in her gaze, and something in him faltered. He'd lived so long chasing death. He'd forgotten there might be something worth staying for. He took a step back, lowering the rifle. We'll wait, he said quietly. Tomorrow, they'll camp by the river. That's where I'll take them. Clara exhaled, shoulders sagging. Then tomorrow I'll be ready. You can barely stand. Maybe, but I won't run. Outside, The riders faded into the distance, their voices swallowed by the wind. Jonas closed the door and leaned against it, exhaustion weighing heavy on him. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in the dark. He looked toward the dying fire where Clara sat, her eyes reflecting the glow. "Revenge don't end a man," she said softly. "It just buries what's left of him." Jonas stared into the embers, their light flickering like the last breath of something fragile. "Then maybe it's time I dug myself out." Beyond the walls, the forest was alive with secrets, the river whispering of reckoning, the night holding its breath for what was to come. And in that quiet between rage and redemption, Jonas Hale began to feel the faint, unfamiliar weight of hope. The morning broke pale and cold, the kind of dawn that seemed to hold its breath. Mist hung low over the valley, curling through the pines like smoke from an unseen fire. Jonas Hale stood at the edge of the ridge, rifle in hand, eyes fixed on the narrow strip of river that shimmered far below. He'd tracked Reed Carson and his men through half the forest, every step drawing him closer to the end he'd promised himself. The air tasted of iron and pine sap. Today he would settle the blood debt. Behind him, Clara limped from the shadows, her face drawn but determined. She'd refused to stay behind, despite the pain that bent her with every step. Jonas turned when he heard her, the brim of his hat catching the first light. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Her answer was quiet, steady. "You saved me, Jonas. Let me help you save yourself." He wanted to argue, to push her away for her own safety, but the words wouldn't come. She had earned her place beside him. And truth be told, he didn't want to face this alone. Below them, the gang had made camp by the water, a half-circle of tents, 3 horses tied to a log, smoke rising from small fire. Reed Carson sat by it, sharpening his knife with slow, deliberate strokes. Even from this distance, Jonas recognized the man's posture. Calm, unhurried, certain, the kind of certainty that came from never being held accountable. Jonas crouched low, scanning the camp, counting rifles. 3 men left, he murmured, 2 guards and Carson. Clara followed his gaze, her eyes hardening. "They look like wolves waiting to feed. Then we'll make sure they choke on what's left." They moved through the trees like shadows, every sound measured, every breath quieted by the weight of what waited ahead. Jonas's heart thudded against his ribs, not from fear, but from the raw anticipation of closure. He'd carried the image of his brother's death for too long, the empty stare, the blood pooling in the dirt. Each memory had been a nail hammered deeper into his soul. But now, as he crept closer, he began to wonder if vengeance would truly set him free or just finish what the war had started. They stopped behind a fallen pine overlooking the camp. Jonas raised his rifle, sighted through the scope, and drew a slow breath. He could end it now, one clean shot. The rifle's wood was warm beneath his palm. The trigger felt alive. Clara touched his shoulder. "Don't make it quick," she said softly. "Make it right." He lowered the rifle slightly, eyes flicking to her. There was no hatred in her voice, only the quiet understanding of someone who'd lost too much to ever find peace in killing. A crack of laughter drifted from below. One of the guards tossed a bone into the fire, while Carson leaned back, sipping from a tin cup. Jonas's jaw tightened. He adjusted his aim and fired. The shot split the air like lightning. One guard fell before the echo faded. The camp erupted in chaos. Carson grabbed his revolver, shouting orders, while the remaining man dove for cover. Jonas fired again, hitting the second guard through the shoulder. Clara stayed low, clutching the pistol he'd given her, eyes wide but steady. Then Carson's voice cut through the smoke. "Jonas Hale," he bellowed. I smelled the past creeping up behind me." Jonas rose from behind the log, rifle leveled. "You should have kept running, Reed." Carson stepped into view, revolver in hand, smirking. The scar across his chin glinted in the morning light. "And missed the chance to finish what you started in Virginia?" "No, I reckon I owed you this meeting." They circled one another across the clearing, 2 remnants of a war that had never really ended. The air between them pulsed with old blood and unfinished stories. Jonas could hear his own heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. "You killed my brother," Jonas said, voice rough with restrained fury. Carson shrugged. He picked the wrong side of the fire. Nothing personal. That's the difference between us, Jonas growled. Everything's personal. They fired at the same moment. Jonas's bullet grazed Carson's arm. Carson's missed entirely, splintering bark behind him. Jonas advanced, closing the distance. Carson reloaded quick and fired again. The shot clipped Jonas's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Pain flared white-hot, but he kept moving, teeth clenched. He tackled Carson to the ground, and the two men crashed into the dirt, fists and fury colliding. Carson swung hard, striking Jonas across the jaw. Jonas countered, driving his elbow into Carson's ribs. The revolver fell between them, half buried in the mud. Both lunged for it. Carson got there first, pressing it against Jonas's chest. Always knew you were too soft, Carson hissed. Jonas's hand shot up, gripping Carson's wrist. The gun trembled between them. Not soft, Jonas rasped. Just tired of killing. He twisted hard. The shot went wide, ripping through the air. Jonas grabbed Carson by the collar, slamming him against the ground. The revolver tumbled free. Carson gasped, his bravado faltering for the first time. Go on, Carson spat. Do it. You know you want to. Jonas stared down at him, chest heaving. Every muscle screamed for it, to pull the trigger, to end the ghost that had haunted him since the war. But behind that hunger was something else, something Clara's voice had awakened. Mercy, fragile but alive. He lowered the gun. No more blood for ghosts, he said quietly. Carson sneered and lunged. Before Jonas could react, a shot cracked through the clearing. Carson froze, eyes wide, then crumpled. Behind him, Clara stood, trembling, smoke curling from the barrel of her pistol. Jonas caught her before she could fall. She was shaking, tears streaking the dirt on her face. He would have killed you, she whispered. I know, he said, holding her close. And you saved me anyway. The forest fell silent except for the river's murmur. Jonas looked down at Carson's body, then up at the endless stretch of pines. For the first time in years, the world seemed still. No more footsteps behind him, no more ghosts whispering his name. He buried the dead beneath a rise overlooking the valley. No markers, no words. The earth would remember enough. Clara stood beside him, leaning on a cane fashioned from a broken branch. The wind tugged at her hair, and the morning sun warmed the chill from their bones. Why didn't you shoot him? She asked after a long silence. Jonas stared at the grave. Because revenge ends a man. Mercy might save one. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time since they'd met, she smiled. Then maybe there's hope for you yet. They gathered what supplies they could from the camp and saddled the horse. The trail ahead wound east toward open land and the promise of something beyond survival. Jonas helped her mount, then swung into the saddle beside her. Together they rode through the thinning trees, the forest slowly giving way to sunlight and open sky. As they reached the ridge, Jonas turned for one last look at the pines. The wind moved through them like a whisper, carrying away the weight of the past. He felt lighter, though he knew the scars would never fade completely. In the quiet pines, he said softly, I found what I didn't know I'd lost. Clara glanced at him. And what's that? He smiled faintly. The part of me that still remembers how to live. They rode on as the sun climbed higher, two survivors bound not by vengeance, but by something stronger, the fragile mercy born from loss. Behind them, the forest held its silence. Ahead, the world waited, wide and untamed.